Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Life with Loverly podcast. Today, I am interviewing Amber Venz Box, who is the president and co-founder of LTK, formerly rewardStyle and LIKEtoKNOW.it, a recognized style creator. Amber conceptualized and launched LTK as a solution to monetize her fashion blog, VenzEdits.com, over a decade ago. Founded by a creator for creators, LTK utilizes Amber's unique perspective to connect top-tier influencers with brand partners worldwide. So if you use the LTK shopping platform to shop on my blog, Loverly Gray, or swipe up on anything that I post on Instagram, you are using Amber's product, LTK. Today, LTK is the leading creator-guided shopping app with over 20 million monthly shoppers, purchasing over $3 billion annually from LTK creators. What was once a taboo hobby has grown into a billion-dollar industry, and Amber has been at the forefront of helping creators monetize their content and turn it into a full-time career. Today, we talk all about how Amber's seamstress grandmothers influenced her as a child, the jewelry line that she started that kicked off everything, how Amber went from being a personal shopper to being on the forefront of a billion-dollar industry, her advice on how to balance motherhood and running an empire, including on how her faith plays a part. And at the end of the episode, she shares tips for creators on how to best utilize the LTK app when getting started. Trust me, this is an episode you don't want to miss. Hi, Amber. How are you?
Brittany, thank you so much for having me here. I am just so honored to get to be on your podcast.
I'm so excited. I feel like we're going to there's so many great questions and just kind of like do a deep dive on like who you are and how rewardStyle and LTK came about. I know I have a lot of listeners and like other content creators who are really excited for this episode. So we're going to dive right in.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. It's been a long journey. It's been over a decade now, 12 years this month. And there's a rich history there that probably most people don't know. So I'm excited to share that.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us about your love of fashion from like a really young age. And I know your grandmother was a big influence in your life. Kind of where did this all start for you from like a young child?
The earliest I remember was in elementary school, and my mom would always fix my hair every day for school. And I always had on like an outfit with matching shoes. And my aunt was an artist, and she would like paint my kid shoes to like match my shirt. And it was like kind of, I guess, early 90s. And so, you can just imagine what all that looked like.
Yeah.
And I remember that being part of like the culture of our household. But then also I was a very quiet, reserved student. And my teachers would always come and ask me about my outfits. And I think now looking back, I think subconsciously I realized that if I was wearing a great outfit, that I could get attention and I didn't have to be the loudest kid in class. And that sort of pulled through. Both of my grandmothers were seamstresses. So as I got older, my mom would, buy People magazine in the grocery store. And I remember sitting there in the car and kind of flipping through and seeing. There was one dress I always remember. It was Jennifer Love Hewitt, and she was wearing this white Marilyn Monroe style dress, but it was a Prada dress. And I took it to my grandmother and I was like, I would love to like have this dress and make this dress. And so I spent a week at her house during the summer, and we found a similar pattern and sat up in her little sewing room for, a full week. I heard all stories about the family, everything. And we made this dress, but both my grandmothers were inclined and really, helped, I think, pull that creativity out of me.
That's so cool. I think about like as I get my kids dressed sometimes and their commentary on like, oh, this has pockets. I don't like that, or they see me getting dressed and leaving to go to work in the morning. It really is kind of like starting this influence in them at such a young age too. It's just so interesting the way that all like really helps shape a person.
Completely. And I've started to realize that I've approached parenthood pretty casually, where I want my children to, express themselves as they want to express themselves. But then I realized that, I might have like gone too far, because I actually really loved the way that my mother like specifically fixed my hair every day. And I look back and I find both a sense of pride in that and just thinking of how much she loved and cared for me. And so I've started to kind of get back more involved in it and make it a bigger kind of like part of our day. But,
Yeah.
Birdie's my 7-year-old, and I don't know where she's sneaking YouTube or TikTok or whatever she's sneaking, but I told her to take a picture of her and her sister the other day. They had on matching dresses, and what I got back on my camera roll was hilarious. I mean, the way they had like propped the camera up and they had their hands in their pockets, and I'll have to share it online. But yeah, it's part of their world now entirely in a way it wasn't for us.
It's so true. It's like, it's a little scary. But there's also so much good, I think, that can come from it too. So with both of your grandmothers being seamstresses, did you ever want to create your own clothing line?
I did. I wanted to create everything always, anything that I saw. And so I think one of my earliest kind of little small businesses I was taking vintage denim and then reworking it into denim skirts. And that was, I think, around like middle school. I was selling those. And so to be part of my program, you had to give me a pair of denim that already fit you. And then $20. And I would, cut through the seams. I would take the stitching out. I would rework it. I did have a sewing machine. I also had a hot glue gun. I really liked the hot glue gun. So when I was lazy, I would use some of that. And so I made some great denim skirts. The hot glue was fine for lots of people. For my sweet cousin who gave me stretch denim, she wore that skirt to school and it just totally split on the first day. And so I learned my lesson about, quality and manufacturing. But, it was back to that. It was always something that I wanted. Like there was, whether it was like the denim skirts or I started a jewelry line in high school. And that was because there was, Jessica Simpson had just started her reality show, like the first ever reality show. She had these wire wrapped gold hoop earrings with this little kind of like gemstone in the middle of them. And I found a store who sold them and they were $120. I knew for a fact my parents would not buy me those. And so I found a way to make them. And that was the launch of the jewelry line, was just me wanting to dress and look like Jessica Simpson. And I made them for myself, and then people at school started asking for them too. And so everything was $20. It was like, these are $20 as well. They probably cost me $35 to make, but everything was $20 at that time.
That's so funny. So then you got into blogging. Was that like when you were in college a little bit more, or when did your blog start?
I always worked in the fashion industry. I knew that I wanted to land there. And candidly, like that was always my passion, whether it was, at home. My mom actually took the TV out of our home for a while. And so her whole thing was like either go, outside and play or do something creative. And I used all that time to be creative and make jewelry and sew. And first out of school, my parents told me that I could either go, like when I graduated high school, they said either go to summer school or you get a job. And I think I ended up doing both because I wanted to work at that retail store that sold the Jessica Simpson jewelry. And so I went in and I was actually very timid. And I said, I was fully decked out and dressed, but I was like, I would like to work at a store like this store. And do you have any friends who have a store like this store? I was just too scared to ask, like, can I work here? Yeah. And the owner that I was talking to was like, you can work here. I was like, I can. And I was just like, my mom's waiting in her car on the side of the shop, like waiting for me to come back and get out and get in it. And so that was my first job, kind of working retail. I moved to LA for a summer and I worked for a stylist there. I thought that I wanted to be the next Rachel Zoe, like to be a fashion stylist in LA specifically. So I made this whole plan for my parents. I wrote it out, and this was my freshman year of college. And I said, okay, I'm going to be Rachel Zoe. Here's how I back into that. I'm going to need to start building my relationships right now. I need to move to LA. I'm going to pack my car. I found a cheap place to live. And my dad was like, okay, take your brother. And so we literally drove across the country, drove to LA, spent the summer there. The next summer I, shared a bed with my best friend in New York because that was when internships weren't paid. That was legal at one point. And so we lived in a 3-bedroom apartment. And we shared a queen bed with like no, headboard, no anything. It was basically just like sheets. We ate brie and drank wine for dinner because that's what we could afford. And worked in wholesale there and then came back to the store. I was in PR. And so I was learning how to make pitch books. And so for the store, I was like, hey, there's all these lines I want us to sell. Can I pitch these lines and see if we can get them? And so I started doing that and found success with it. So then I became a buyer for the store. And basically I take you through all that because I had worked kind of on all sides of the industry. And
Yeah.
what that unknowingly prepared me for was to be equipped to understand what every single person in this ecosystem wanted, whether it was, the press or the stylist or the celebrities themselves, or what the manufacturer in New York was looking for when they sold into the retail store. And so I had really worked on all sides by the time I launched my blog. So that was a long, long journey around to tell you about the blog. I had a jewelry line still. So that jewelry line
Mm-hmm.
from high school actually took off. And so that
Wow.
was the biggest part of my earnings. And then I worked at the store. I had clients that would come in the store and I would dress them for their vacations or for events. When I met Baxter, who's now my husband and my co-founder at LTK, he was looking over my shoulder one night at my spreadsheets of all my jewelry earnings. He was like, what are these spreadsheets? What is it? What are these totals? And I was like, well, this is my jewelry line and this is, kind of my fun money. And like, I have my real job too. And he was like, well, I'm looking at this right here. Like, where is this money? And I was like, do you not see my bags and my shoes? Like, I am well dressed. I'm having fun. And he was like, well, you make more than twice as much on your jewelry line as your real job. Like, you need to leave your job. You need to go invest in this and like see if you can grow this. And so I did. And I started growing the jewelry line. And in order to have money to kind of reinvest and grow the line, I continued the personal shopping side. So instead of working for that one store, I went to many stores around town and said, hey, this is my history. Can we negotiate a deal? And if I sell your clothes to my clients, then I'll get paid a commission. But, I'm not going to work exclusively for you, but I will have a deal with you. And so that business I absolutely loved because I loved styling people. I loved my customers and getting them ready for whatever event it was. And I launched a blog in 2010 because to me, it was a website. This was kind of before blogging was a known part of vernacular.
Mm-hmm.
And it was going to be documenting all my work offline with this personal shopping. And my thought was, if I can demystify personal shopping and make it approachable, that I'll get more customers offline. And so 2010, I set out and I started blogging 3 times a day, and kind of documenting all the work that I was doing offline for customers.
Wow. Okay. I feel like so much to unpack here. This is so fascinating, though. So, do you still have the jewelry or where's the jewelry?
Yes. So the jewelry I closed down in 2012. So I
Okay.
launched it in the early 2000s. And then so it had a really nice run.
Yeah.
I will say with the jewelry line, I was pretty much a one-woman show. Like, I had hired interns to try and help me with things, but I had no corporate or strategic or, larger experience to even be able to manage people or even know how to
Yeah.
tell them what to do. And so while it was on paper successful, I was working around the clock and I really had hit a ceiling. And that came down to my ability to delegate and manage others. That also, 2008 was a very tough year. So
Yeah.
2008, I graduated college early. On that day, I was like, hey, Dad, will you like keep paying my rent? Because I'm going to like make this jewelry line. He was like, nope, you can move home and eat what's in our closet. And so I was, trying to make things go. With the jewelry line, the reason I closed it down was what was rewardStyle, now LTK, was taking off. And
Mhm.
candidly, I loved it so much more because it was asset light. I had a
Yeah.
laptop and I could just I'd go to the office and I'd work on my laptop. And the jewelry line was frustrating. I bring up 2008 because, like I said, that was the year I graduated from college. I was trying to make the jewelry line grow. It was really taking off at that point. I had started investing in it. I had built a whole website for it. It wasn't just selling it wholesale anymore. I was selling it direct to consumer. I had several department stores who had picked it up and I was
Wow.
thrilled. I mean, things were going really well. I had some department stores order multiple sets of the entire collection. But what I found, which was, maybe one of the greatest lessons of my life, was when you're doing business with a department store, at least at that time, they have a set of terms that all their vendors agree to. And
Right.
those terms are that you basically front the money for everything that they've ordered. Then you're on a net whatever. So net 30, net 90, net 120, and that means they don't have to pay you until that point. So 120 days later, 90 days later. And then there's all these sort of fees for did you mark the bags correctly? Was it in the bags that they like it in? Is the box sent to the right address? And then you have fees for anything that you've done wrong with that, or they can bounce your box. So 2008 hits. I have all of this money invested in this line. I've spent, a lot of it was handmade stuff. And so, hours on hours on hours getting these
Yeah.
collections launched and in store. And the economy tanks. And I had some stores that just kept the product and never paid for it. I had some that like kind of, just shipped back whatever didn't sell and sent me a check for what did, as if it was like consignment. It was heartbreaking to me because it was all of my money and all of my savings. And it just didn't seem fair. Like there was a store at the mall that was a sparkly store right across from Neiman Marcus. And the woman wouldn't let me take my jewelry, and she also wouldn't pay me for it. And so, I mean, I was just this little girl who was like, I don't understand, like these are not the rules. And so I'd been through a tough patch and learned a lot. And I saw a brighter future with rewardStyle. So 2012, that January, I closed it down. And I donated all of like my supplies and goods to, a charity who basically, kind of a cool story. They use refugee women to, make kind of interesting products, whether it's clothing or jewelry or whatever, and sell those. And so it felt like it had a good home, and I was able to like kind of, cleanly walk away from that.
The chapter. So then when you started your blog and you were doing the personal, like styling, did you kind of like run into a roadblock with people who were like wanting to shop online, but then like you were making the commission from the like stores? Was there a crossover? I mean, I think this is kind of where like rewardStyle got its birth a little bit.
Exactly.
Right. So
with the personal shopping, I would physically go into usually like at least 3 stores at a time for a customer. Mm-hmm. And then I would buy, get everything in their sizes, bring them into their home, style them, take photographs of them, show them all the pieces. Some products would always have to be swapped in and out for sizing or whatever. And then, so finally I would go back, charge the credit card at the store. And then I was again on a payment plan. So maybe 30 days later, I would have to go back to the owner, sit there and remind them of what I had sold, wait for the check. Sometimes it was a $30 check, sometimes a $16 check, sometimes it was a $100 check. But I'm sitting there, begging these people to cut me checks. Right. This was the same year. So Dallas Morning News, I had a great relationship with them because whenever cool product would come into the store that I worked at previously, I would call the fashion editors and be like, we got this cool thing, or like, this is here. And so, and that was just because I genuinely loved my job. And so I had made friends with them. And so when I launched my blog, they did this full page article in the Dallas Morning News. And at the top, all block letters, it said blogger. And it said, meet the blogger. And that's kind of when I found out that what I was doing was called blogging. I just thought I had a marketing website. And then in the article, it said, hey, this, the girl, she has a jewelry line. She was this shop girl. She's a personal shopper. She's offering her services online for free. And I was like, that's not what I told them. That is not at all what I told them. I was like, why did they write that? But I was so happy to have the piece of press that I was like, whatever, they just didn't get it. And then, by October of 2010, so this is like maybe 6 months later, I was like, they were so right. I am doing all this work for free now because I had hired a photographer. I'd paid for a custom website. I was documenting all the work I was doing. And then, by documenting, I was saying like, roll the sleeve this way, buy it at this place. And, my customers were texting me or emailing me. That was normal at the time. And like, oh my gosh, I love your newsletter, or I got that bag, or you're right, the jeans are great. Like, keep it up. I love the blog. And I was like, they love the blog. And I now have less money than ever before. My jewelry line is like, going this other way. I am paying a photographer. I am paying for this custom website. I'm blogging 3 times a day. And so Baxter, his background as an engineer. He was in grad school, and he was getting his kind of strategy and finance degree there, getting his MBA at SMU. And he saw what I was going through, and he was like, what do you want to do, the jewelry, or do you want to do the blog, or what's your plan? And I was like, I really love blogging, but I can't go to this store and collect the $30 or the $100 because, I can't prove it that they bought it the way that I could before. And so he was like, well, do you want me to help you make money on your blog? And so, yes. And so we went on a walk. We like took the dog. We literally walked down to Starbucks on Knox Street, if anyone's like in Dallas. And on the way there, he was like, all cards on the table. You can have anything that you want. Like, how would you make money? And I was like, I just want to make the commission that I always made. Like that worked for everybody. That seemed fair. Like if I could just get the credit for what I was doing. And he was like, okay, well, like, what would this thing be called? And I was like, well, I guess rewardStyle, because if you have good taste, then people are going to buy what you're showing them, and then you're going to make money. So it's kind of like rewarding you for having great style. And we got on domain.com, and it was like, of course, available, because what a weird name. But we bought it and we launched it. And so at night, I would like sit on PowerPoint and I would draw the wireframes. I didn't know they're called wireframes. I was told that. But like what I wanted the pages to look like, and I was going to click here, and it did this. And then later evening, we had a friend who was a designer. And so he would come over and translate my PowerPoints into true wireframes. And then on the weekends, we would sit with an engineer that we were like paying just by the hour and try to explain what everything needed to do and how it was going to work. And by early 2011, we had a product that was, I mean, MVP is not even the word. Like it was very, very, very simple. We had maybe 2 retailers that had agreed to kind of work with us. And it was me and a handful of my friends kind of testing it out to see if this was going to work, if we could make money online as fashion bloggers.
So at what point of this were you like, let me offer this to other people?
So,
Like to your, even just like your close friends who just were trying it out or helping kind of get some like testing the waters.
I think it was always part of the larger plan because it needed to be kind of bigger than me in order to even justify building out and like investing in this engineering work and, all that it would take to get these brands on board and integrated. And so I just started looking around to see who I knew that had a blog. And one of my friends was at SMU still, and SMU had started requiring a blog for one of the communications classes. And so I was like, hey, do you want to like test this product and like see how this works? And I had another friend, and by the way, these are all people I had profiled on my blog. So I used to have a section called Girl of the Moment, GOTM. And it was like every Tuesday for a month, like I'd pick one person. They were the person for the full month. Every Tuesday I would do like a deep dive on them and like different outfits and tell different parts of their stories. And so, it was everyone from, I went to school with Whitney Wolf Herd from Bumble. And so she had a bag line that was donating money to save the seals. So she was on there for her bag line. Crystal Schlegel, who was a younger girl than me that I had profiled, who had a blog at SMU.
Yep.
Bradley Agather was one. So Bradley had Luella in June, and now I think it's just bradleyagathor.com. And so they were all people who, Bradley had like a Tumblr page with her best friend. And I was like, do you want to try it? And so it was literally me just like, I remember one night sitting in Baxter's parents' house. I think the Super Bowl was on, and I was calling Bradley and I was like, hey, that Tumblr, like, do you want to see like if you could make money on it? And so that's really kind of how it started, was just anyone I knew that was kind of interested in this space to see if they would want to jump in with me.
Well, and it's interesting because I feel like just even my experience with LTK, like you kind of need a little bit of a sales background or just like a business. I mean, you don't need that, but I'm hearing from your story how like going into just like these boutiques and brands and selling your earrings, like that is so similar to once you had this product asking people, hey, do you want to try this? Do you want to test it? It's like you're kind of using past experiences to like bring what you have to life, if that makes sense.
Entirely.
So it's always interesting to see like how it can connect from such an early age. So how would you say, like, at what point were you and Baxter like, okay, this is actually like something, like we are going in this direction?
So it was that winter, and I don't know if I'd say it was 2010 or 2011, but that winter time. And I was able to, make a decent amount of money doing it. And, the friends I mentioned were starting to make money and they were excited and they were posting more because they were making money doing it. And it was no longer just like a school hobby or like a thing that somebody did, with wine with their best friend. It was like, oh, this could actually like be a business. So Baxter and I pulled all of our friends together, and there was an Irish pub, kind of like in our neighborhood. We went there and there's maybe like 15 people, and we kind of stood up and we were like, hey, we started this thing and like Amber's doing it. She's making money doing it. And I kind of told them about like how it works. We were like, we actually think this is like pretty big. Like all these things are sort of hitting, a couple of retailers have said yes. And like, other girls besides Amber are starting to make good money doing it. And we think that there's a future, but we need some money to pay engineers to like keep building this thing. And I wasn't getting paid. Baxter, of course, wasn't getting paid. It was just like we had put like $1,000 at a time, like as we had it, into this like engineer. And so people kind of went around and they wrote small checks. And one of the guys that was there was like, Baxter, if this is such a big opportunity, why are you not quitting your job and doing it too? Because I was already doing it full time, even though I wasn't being paid. I was just like, I had not a lot to lose and a dad's house to live in. So,
Right.
Here we are. And so Baxter was like, that's fair. Like, I'm going to make a plan and I will quit my job and like, I will do this too. And so by let's see, I think by the summer we like opened an office, which was a studio apartment in Mockingbird Station in Dallas. It was the smallest apartment, but we wanted to be in a cool area where like, Starbucks was downstairs. There were restaurants there. It was like a happening place. We definitely could not afford to be on the commercial side. We definitely could not afford to pay commercial internet. I mean, again, I was not being paid. I was scared when Baxter said we're going to open an office. I was like, I live at home. Like, why are we paying rent somewhere else? And then, we set aside $800 to buy office furniture. And I was like, how are we going to like make this go? I was like, Mom, how are we going to figure this out? Like $800, that's like a chair. Like, I don't even know how we would do that, So we found like a defunct, business in Fort Worth, drove over there and like packed up their, like, their chairs, their desks. That June, which was the June we opened, I think it was my 23rd birthday. And I got a Keurig for my birthday from my parents, and our engineer always just like begged for coffee. And so it was like, now we're a real office. Like we have a Keurig, we have some desks. So yeah, it started, at that point, but it was, I think something you touched on earlier, which I think is so important, was the past work experience. And I talk to Baxter all the time about how I really want, as soon as our kids can start working, to do anything in any industry, whatever that is, just go try something. I mean, working in a retail store is, it's a hospitality business. Like I'm picking up people's clothes off the floor. I'm zipping their zippers up. Like I'm trying to make things easy for them. I got a lot of experience in that small store because the owners gave me a lot of freedom. And so I would merchandise the store. I would pick the lines. Like it was kind of my little dollhouse, and I got to do a lot there. But, working in LA, I learned a whole lot. Working in New York, I learned a whole lot, totally different cultures, having my own line, going through 2008. And so I think whatever industry you're in, that there's something to be said about understanding what drives every single person in the ecosystem and what those cultures are like. And then understanding then, okay, well, when I walk into this store and whether I'm selling them earrings or I want them to commission me and my friends to pay to, sell things online, how am I going to position it in a way that they win? The earliest days, this was like kind of before LinkedIn. So when you think about getting these retailers for online, Vogue didn't have a website yet. Most retailers were not online. Social media was just launching. This was pre-Instagram.
Right.
And so it was hard to track people down. The way that we got into Net-a-Porter, which was one of my biggest, like, exciting moments, was our interns, boyfriends, sisters, roommate, who was a designer, a graphic designer at Net-a-Porter. And that's how we got a meeting at Net-a-Porter. Was like, everyone I asked would know, like, was just like, do you know anyone who works in fashion? Do you know anyone at this retailer?
Yeah.
And there were retailers who, were early, like Shopbop and Net-a-Porter were early believers. It was low risk. If it didn't work, they owed nothing, and we made it super easy. And then there were other retailers who were like, one woman told me, she was like, if I paid a blogger, I would get fired. She was like, we work with celebrities, we work with magazines. She was like, this is a hard no-go. And that was honestly the reaction for most retailers. Even I think 2015 was the first time we started actually getting applications to work for rewardStyle from a brand perspective. Yeah. But otherwise, I had spent easily the first 5 years on the road, just sitting in front of brands, trying to explain that we could minimally bring them traffic, but we could also bring them sales. And they had a hard time wrapping their minds around like offboarding their brand and their marketing to someone else that was seen as much lesser than.
Right. It's so crazy. I think when I was in college, we had a boutique here who had just started posting photos on Facebook of like what the clothes were that were coming in. And so the owner hired me to come in and just try the clothes on, and like she would take a picture of it and then they would put it on their Facebook page so people could see clothes like on a person. And I look back now and I'm like, that is so crazy that 8 years before I even started a blog, there were pictures of me in like clothes. So just people could see what it looked like on, just, providing a service. What about, when was like the connection between Instagram and like the LIKEtoKNOW.it? That was like such a brilliant just idea of truly like the photo and then get the details. Like, so where was this in like history of LTK?
So our official launch of what was then rewardStyle was June of 2011. Mm-hmm. And then by the end of definitely by the end of 2013, we were looking at our data and it was showing that, because remember, okay, so a lot had actually happened during this time. So when we launched, it was all about blogs and specifically fashion blogs. And there was only Facebook and Twitter. And you would use, like, bloggers would sometimes, especially like internationally, because blogging was bigger in Europe, they would have Facebook pages that pointed to their blogs. I would use Twitter to point to a blog. That used to work back then. Now it's like very different. But, and so then in 2012, 13 was when Facebook bought Instagram. And that was also at the same time that Apple came out with their iPhone. And like, so first gen iPhone was like around 2000, I want to say 13. And that was when the App Store came loaded on the phone. Right. And so it was just like, you think about all the things happening at once. You have this phone with like a camera built in, because we started the business, I had a BlackBerry. Right. And by the way, there's a great Netflix on BlackBerry that I just watched, but it kind of tells the whole story. But BlackBerry, all of a sudden you can have a phone with a camera built in, which changed things for creators, because previous to that, you had to have a really expensive camera, whether that was a small digital or a DSLR. It costs money to be a blogger. It costs money to have a website. So then by 2013, you could have basically, quote, a website by being on Instagram, for example, without having to pay for the website. You could get your comments, all of that very, very quickly. Your tool to create that photo was actually on your phone already. So you had it in your pocket, and Instagram was making it pretty. So you didn't have to be good at taking photos. Mm-hmm. So all of that came about, and our creators were able to expand into this first ever mobile social walled garden. Because remember, previously it was all desktop. And by 2013, we saw about 30% of retail traffic from our creators was coming from phones. But remember, that phone screen was like so small. Right. And so imagine just like a huge website shrunken down into this like tiny screen. So at that point, a couple of things happened. One, we were like, oh my God, this industry is going to be over unless we make all these blogs mobile responsive. Creators didn't know how to like go in and technically change. And so we hired engineers to go in and make all of their blogs mobile responsive. So it was a better experience for their customers. A year later, Instagram had become popular, but again, walled garden, you can't link out. And so I had been begging Baxter to go to Marfa. And so in Marfa, Texas, if you don't know, is like this, it's like Manhattan dropped into the middle of the desert. It's an art town with some of the most interesting, cool people in the world. And there's literal tumbleweeds going by, and there is like one stoplight and, but tons of art galleries. So I wanted to go, and he was like, finally said, okay, well, we will go. This is the end of 2013. He was like, we'll go, but every single day we are going to stay in the hotel, and at least for half the day, we're going to work on figuring out how to monetize Instagram. And we're not going to leave Marfa until we have done that. And so we would sit there in the Paisano Hotel. They don't even open till like dinner time. We'd sit in there like little leather chairs, and we would come up with, basically what we came up with was called LIKEtoKNOW.it. And so the thought was we would tie into the API on Instagram. And if you would register for our service that was called LIKEtoKNOW.it as a consumer. And if you did, whenever you liked photos that were by our creators, we would send you an email, like a newsletter, within 7 minutes. And it would show you that post that you liked with all the shoppable information about it. And so it was very difficult at that time whenever we launched it, because first of all, our team didn't believe in it. They were like, you want creators to tell people to do what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, we work with bloggers. This is so weird. So they were like really not super excited about it. On the blogger side, I was sitting at lunch with a handful of bloggers one day. I was like, guys, we figured out how to monetize Instagram. And they're like, yes. And I was like, so you need to tell your audience that they need to sign up for LIKEtoKNOW.it. And then you need to load every photo and tell us what's in them. And we will send them a newsletter. And they're like, nope. And it was like, what? I get it, but you have to teach them. But once they're taught, like, it's there, and like they will know, and they'll get that information. So it was difficult, on the creator side as well, because they were like, I don't want my audience to, like, I've never told them to do something before. Right. Like that. It feels weird. So the first year, we sold $10 million worth of product through LIKEtoKNOW.it. And then the next year we sold $50 million worth of product through LIKEtoKNOW.it. And it was a growing part of our creators' businesses. And that at this point, Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin were consciously uncoupling. And the word consciously uncouple, for some reason, when I read like Goop and I read that whole article she put out about it, I was like, we have to consciously uncouple from Instagram. And so I literally pulled our engineers together in a room. We sat in a boardroom, and I was also newly pregnant and also like just feeling urgency about everything. And I was like, we have to consciously uncouple. And so we made a whole list on the board, and it was like how we would untether from Instagram. And it was like step by step by step. And like every single day I was like checking things off the list because we were like, oh my gosh, this is going to get so big and they're going to turn it off. And so by the time we hit 150 million in sales, which was like the following year, so triple. I mean, it was just expanding so rapidly. We were great down the path of like uncoupling, and we were like, we need an app. And so we went and bought a small tech team out of New York that had a really cool screenshot technology, and they could build apps. And so we were like, we need this app launched like right now. And so they were fully focused on this. And so we launched that app in 2017. So spring of 2017, we launched it South by. And the whole thing with the app was like, hey, now you need to tell your audience something different. You need to tell them they need to download the app, and they can just screenshot the stuff that they want the information from. Same sort of service, but like we're going to move them into the app because Snap was becoming big. And we were like, oh, with Snap, like there's no like liking. It's a different. So we were like, we've got to become agnostic to all of these platforms. And so we launched the app a year to the day after we launched the app. Instagram pulled the plug on the API for the LIKEtoKNOW.it.
Yes,
and so
I remember that. It was like, wait, no, but we were fine because we had been training people how to shop through the app for so long.
Right. Yeah, it was literally like we had prepared for this day. And I remember when it happened, and some people on our team were like, oh my gosh, they pulled the plug. And I was like, guys, we prepared for this. Like we knew it. This is why we built the app. Literally, I just need you to update some comms. We're sending it out to, all of our users. We're sending it out to our creators. Like, this is what we're telling the creators. Like, hey, now this is the only way. And, for consumers as well. And so bridge that kind of gap, and then have grown from there even tremendously now, to where people are now buying over $4 billion worth of products, through LTK on an annual basis. And so consumers wanted the service. I think it's become something that was, I think back to those days of sitting in that room with the woman who was like, I would get killed if, I'd get fired if I paid a blogger, to now it's culturally normative to have a shopping guide that you trust, that you've opted into, that can take you shopping. I think most people, regardless of, what their interest is, whether it's, fashion or home, or maybe it's, canoeing, they have an expert that they, trust that to take them shopping for the right product.
Yeah. I feel like there were also so many things happening because like stories weren't a thing on Instagram. When I first started, I remember like for like the first 5 months that I had like a blogger version of my Instagram, I didn't have an LTK because this was back when like you kind of had to prove that you were going to like be somebody trustworthy. You couldn't just like sign up the day you started to like get into the platform. And then I remember it was like this shift between having this like beautiful content and just like kind of everyday stuff, and really like getting people to trust you. But then there was no stories to like share your story. So then you would have to take up like a grid and make a caption that explained like, this is how you shop, or write a blog post and then be like, today in the blog, I'm talking all about how to use like LTK or LIKEtoKNOW.it and how to get the links to things. And you really had to educate your followers early on. But for those bloggers who had been doing this for longer than I had, you could tell they were like hesitant to just not create like a pretty post. And it was like, do people really want that? And then stories started, and then it became this like really personal thing. And then you could just have a conversation with people and say, I really need you guys this is how you shop things. And I remember it being awkward at first, like, this is how I make money, but I mean, you don't know if you don't know. And so it's just like the history throughout like the influencer and the blogger using your platform. I feel like there's like so many pieces of that just kind of all fell into place kind of.
It's a history that it's built on day by day. Like I think back to, we talked about the desktop, and then kind of moving, then you're still blogging, but you're blogging on mobile, but it's hard for your customer. And then, moving your customer and kind of expanding into social media, and that's their preferred because it's the easiest. Like customers always will go to like whatever is like the simplest way to do whatever they're doing regardless of like, name your thing, and they're going to always pick like the easy path.
Mm-hmm.
And so then going into social media, and social media launched as this place where it was much like blogging, where it was very human centric, and you're following a person. And if you like Brittany, then you might like Amber. And if you like Amber, you might like Nikki. And it's like taking you through person by person. You're opting into their stop motion reality show. But then, like you said, Snap comes about, TikTok comes about, stories are about reels. And I think the one thing that I always try to teach all of our clients in our team is that change is the only constant, and technology is always going to change consumer preferences. And so it's not what we want, it's what makes their lives easier. And we have to really rotate our businesses to make sure we're using world-class technology to meet their need of, just we're still hospitality in the same way in the store. I'm zipping zippers and I'm hanging clothes up. Like we're still doing that, but in like the digital version today, and just trying to make their lives very easy. Whether that's, tagging all the right products, or, telling them the sale codes, or, going into this description and, adding about sizing and all of this type of stuff. Like we're still just doing the digital version of kind of making it easier, but it's going to continue to change. And, you've seen lately platforms have become very much about entertainment. So where, I launched on my Instagram, for example, really wholeheartedly, like 2013. By today, 2023, majority of people who, see my content are not even my followers. It's all about, they're leveraging AI to get that interesting, entertaining content in front of a consumer, which now means I operate differently. And I have to reteach people again, because people are seeing my content for the first time that don't know how to get to it. And so the comments are, where'd you get the jeans? Or can I have a link to the sweater? And I'm like, oh, they don't know me. And so I have to tell them like, hey, if you liked this outfit plus 2,000 other outfits are on my LTK shop. And so we're sort of back to that, re-educating our consumers on, how we can be the best, server to them and their needs.
Totally. I tell my team all the time, I'm like, this is a customer service job. Like we are responding to messages. We are helping people find a solution to their problem. We've like, when we respond back, it's all customer service. It's just like, this is just how we do it. But it's been amazing, I think, just with everything that LTK has like come to be and the ease of shopping, and I know you and I have had this conversation previously, but it's really the LTK app is a place where you don't have to make a decision to like, I'm going to go to Nordstrom or I'm going to go to Target. You're going to go to the LTK app and like find the people that you really vibe with, and they're going to tell you in their shops, like, where to find the pieces that you want. Like you can search on their red bathing suit and all these options will come up instead of just going to one retailer. So you're giving people a ton more options than like what one retailer would limit them to.
Yes. The job we do, I think, is it's curating. It's also testing and trying products, and then giving kind of the recommendations of the things that we actually do like. And then, all the details, like I'll tell you today, I'm wearing these, like this horseshoe jeans, and they run 2 to 3 sizes larger. And so I'm teaching everyone, hey, this is the place that has them in stock. You need to order them 3 sizes smaller. And I've gone through and tried on all the different colors, and this is the color that you need. And so it's going in, and it's the same thing I did before with personal shopping, which is you're going in and doing the work. You're putting the looks together for everyone. You're finding the best and most interesting products, because I want my followers to go out in the world and get compliments from everyone. I want them to be the best dressed. I want their kids to be the cutest at the pool. I want their tabletop to be something that gives them a source of pride when they have friends over. Like I want them to be the heroes. And so I'm going out and doing that work for them, and then making it easy for them to do it, because I know that not everyone is passionate about shopping in the way that I am, or curating the way that I am. And so, to make it turnkey for them, and for me to be able to kind of bring joy into their life, that's a driving force for me, and what gets me excited about posting every day.
Yeah. Okay, let's move into a little bit more about like personal life. I know you and Baxter are married and you guys have 4 kids, which is amazing. As a mom and as somebody who's like running an empire, do you have any advice for maybe the mom who is like busy working mom, and just kind of like what are some rhythms you have in place for your day to day?
Yes. There's a couple that I definitely have learned from trial and error, and some from advice from other parents. One that I think we can all do is identifying the things that are important for you. I'm going to call them like the core memories that you want to have with your child, or you want to be, a part of personally, and then calendaring those things. So the example for me was, I wanted to go to Birdie's dance lesson. I wanted to drop her off. I wanted to be there when she came out. I wanted to talk to her about it. I wanted that to be a memory for us. And so I scheduled that on my calendar, and including travel time, like this is defendable. This is what I'm going to do with her. Or, once a month I go and I volunteer at her cafeteria so I can see her. And so that's on my calendar. It is like what's happening. There's going to be different things for you that you find important. The opposite side of that was this mom was telling me, she was like, look, if I'm PTA president, that takes time away from my child. Or if I'm doing something like behind the scenes at the school, it needs to be done certainly, but because I'm a working mother, I only have so much to give. And I'm going to do the things like I'm going to show up at class with the cupcakes, or I'm going to, go have the lunch at the school. So I thought that was a great piece of advice, is like, what are the things you can do that are like with and for them that they see visually and that you can calendar? On the flip side of that, there are other things too that you can outsource or get more help with. So one thing that, I probably have a pattern of, I'm going to describe as like, be the hero of like, no, I can do it all. Like I can do it. And so what I've done this last year that's different, that has really changed everything about our mornings, is I have someone take my kids to school, but I have them arrive 45 minutes before they go to school. So I have time during that morning to, get them dressed, do the hair like we talked about, like the things that I care about them making sure they're ready. But that person can make sure the backpacks are packed, the water is filled, the car has gas, whatever. And if there's a morning where like maybe Baxter and I just need to have a conversation about something, or we need to go on a walk, or there's a urgent meeting, then that morning I won't do the hair, and that person can do the hair and whatever else and get them out the door. But it has made our mornings like stress free in order to kind of layer that person in. And then kind of, I found someone who, for us, is a housekeeper in the evenings, but can flex into being a babysitter. This is important for this specific time of my life, because yes, I can do all of our family's laundry, but I will be up till midnight every night doing it. Also, I have kids that are in sports, but I also have like a baby. And so if I take the baby to the sports, then the baby gets all the attention. I'm not seeing them. I'm not cheering for them. And so for this like chapter of my life, I have found someone that, when the sports are going, they can keep the baby at home. When they're not, they can be doing the laundry. And so that everything is optimized for my time kind of with my children. And then the other thing is just boundaries. And so I learned this, both within myself, like running a business, but also there's a woman who came into our business that was really great up front, a fantastic hire that we really wanted. And she was like, I want you to know that like, I will deliver. She was definitely the person for us, but she was like, but from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock, that is family time every night. And she was like, I will not take a meeting that goes past 5. I will be hanging up the phone at 5 o'clock, and I am feeding my kids. I'm doing the sports. And then if something is urgent and needs to be like revisited, I will be right back on at 8 o'clock and we will totally get it done. But she was like, this is like sacred family time. And I had such huge respect for that. And I was like, everyone needs to have that. I need to tell everyone who walks in this door, like, just tell us what your boundaries are for your family, because I think that you'll be happier here longer and bring your best self if you feel like you have the flexibility to do the things that are important for you sustainably. For Baxter and I, that has meant that we don't work nights or weekends. And so, being a couple that works in the same business, there's always ideas that are coming up that I want to run by him, or like, oh, I found this out, or did you know this, or I think we should X, Y, Z. And what we do is we schedule time with the other person during that next week on their calendar that's specific to that topic. And I often find that I can get to a solution or work it out in my own mind even before we have that meeting. But it makes me know that like I do have time set aside for it, but we're not going to take time, even from a conversation standpoint, out of our weekend or our personal time together. Those have all been really helpful.
Yeah, I love that about just with you and Baxter, because Chris and I work together as well. And there are so many times where it is a night or weekend that I'm like, we really need to sit down and like have this conversation, and then it takes away from every night, just becomes like a meeting, and that like, that's not really fun, but it's also sort of just, I think having the confidence, like how you said that new hire came in and was just like, this is just what it is. But like having the confidence to set that boundary and knowing that like your family is most important, but like you're going to do like a kick-ass job in your job when like that is where you can 100% focus. Okay. So how would you say your faith looks in this season of life right now?
Yeah, it's grown. A ton. I totally appreciate this question. So I grew up in church, and then in college, I would say just engaged a lot less.
Mm-hmm.
And then in my adult life, I would say probably like most people through kind of the trials of life and kind of seeking for answers and going through kind of a rough patch was like, I need to like recenter and kind of find home. And so I actually reached out to a person that I went to college with. It was a guy that I loosely knew, but he just always stood out to me as a very strong Christian. And he had had his own challenges in life and had kind of come through that and was just consistently living his faith. And so I messaged him and I was like, hey, it's me from a while back. What church do you go to? Because I was like, this person's different and whatever's like happening in their life is what I want. And so recommended a church to me. I started going there. Baxter actually separately started going to this kind of church. There was a period of time where we weren't together. And so there was one sermon though that just hit me. And I'm sure it's one that we've probably all heard if you've grown up in a Christian faith. It's just about bearing fruit. And for some reason this Sunday, it just hit me that it was like, hey, your life will look a little different if your faith is real. And I was like, wow, there are a lot of things in my life right now that don't look the way that I would want them to look based on what I believe. And so that was probably maybe 10 years ago. And so I would think that people would say that have known me through that whole period that, you know, my life is very different right now, specifically like in this moment. I think of like my children as kind of like my first priority. And so how do I, and really the order is, you know, my faith and then my husband and then my children. But with my children, like they're my first kind of like ministry. And so how am I investing in them? And so we've done a lot lately to kind of get our arms around our children. We, you know, in growing and building a business, any entrepreneur will tell you that it's just always on and it's all the time. And Baxter and I didn't even start taking vacations until probably 5 years ago, like, or even, I mean, weekends, maybe in the last 5 to 7 years was when we started not working on weekends. And so there was just a lot of our life that was around the clock work. And so now with our children, they've just grown up so quickly. Like Birdie is 7, my youngest is 2, and we have 4 kids. And I'm seeing that like, I really want to be the one who's shaping and molding them. And I'm starting to see things, you know, coming through school friends and conversations that we're having. And so we have done a lot right now to kind of get our arms around them. And so not only kind of, I changed my work hours to where I actually work earlier in the day and get off earlier so that I finish work when they finish school, which gives us that time in the afternoon to be together, which has been very helpful. The other thing that we've done is we're taking kind of what I'm calling like a family gap year. So we have moved to a very small town in Texas, and we're doing it for like a year and a half. And the whole point is that we're sort of, I'm going to call it like we're ejecting socially from all of our responsibilities, you know, back in Dallas, so that we have all that time with our kids. So that after work, you know, we're going on hikes, we're riding bikes together, we're making food together. Like we've really, one of the cool things about being here is being able to kind of refocus on our diet because there's not restaurants around. And so we're making everything that we're eating, which I can also see a change. My kids are drinking way more water. They just like look healthier. But we're spending a ton of time together as a family. And I would say that really started in this recognition of like our faith and how much we want to invest in our children and what we want their lives to look like. And so luckily LTK is a remote first organization, so you can work from anywhere, and we're taking advantage of that and kind of spending this time with them to make sure that they have us modeling well for them as parents.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like this is going to be something they look back in their lives and remember and think about too, which is, I don't know, I think if it's a positive thing for them to look back on that, and even who knows, I mean, one of your kids might be like, this is where my faith like blossomed or started out, and thanks to my parents for doing this. But that was really great to hear and some good tips. So thank you for sharing. We're going to wrap up in just a second, but I have a few more questions I wanted to ask for our creators who listen to the podcast. If you could maybe give us a few tips. What would you say is the biggest piece of advice you would give somebody who is just starting out on the platform?
Okay. So I think one of the biggest things, and I'm so glad you asked this question. I always try to go back to like, what is the problem that you're solving or the job that you're doing? And so as a creator, it's so easy to be pulled by what does a brand want? What's the platform want from me? Like, how do I like win this game? And actually, it's just, if you go back to what is your role as being a creator, it's actually building a community of like-minded people. And so, and sometimes certain platforms are built for that. And then sometimes they're not. And sometimes it changes and there's different ways that you do it. So you have to figure out what's the right way for you to be able to do that. But it's building a community. And so I would challenge any creator of like, when you're creating content, the number one thing, what sets like why this is an industry is because people like to connect with other people. They like to have digital friends, digital best friends, a digital guide. And candidly, they don't even think of them as digital. They just think of them as their real friends. And so how can you be that for somebody? And like, what is it that you know, your expertise, or just being a friend, kind of in sharing? And don't let that get away from you, because your humanity is the number one reason why this industry exists. And if you are not developing a kind of a personality that people want to opt into and follow, then it's going to be really hard to be successful in this environment. So developing a personality, being someone that people want to follow, really cherishing your community. That's all kind of like the human side. You look at what's happening right now with like AI and generative AI and the platforms pushing for entertainment. And, it's like they want you to be funny and like be a comedian. And then if you're not, then you're not seen. Or, a brand wants you just kind of like curating from their own store and like showing all the best stuff from there. But that's not actually what being a creator is. And that's not why this industry exists. And so I think it's important to always go back to the job that you're doing, in that community building. The second thing is it is, if you want it to be, it is a very real career. And it can set you up for opportunities that are, multi-generational. And so with that in mind, like any business that you start, you need to define what is it, the service you're going to do, how frequently you're going to do it, what's the investment you're going to make. And many businesses don't turn a profit for many, many years. I think that that you can do it, in less than many, many years, but it's still that you have to be investing constantly in creating content and content that connects with other people and that realistically solves, their problems. I'll give you an example. I still learn from this, all the time. And the Stanley mug like took off, like everyone loves the Stanley cup. And I'll tell you, I was a little anti in the beginning. I was a Yeti girl. I was like, I've got a Yeti. Why do I need a Stanley? I was pushing back. And then, someone gave me one as a gift actually. And, it has this big straw. And I was like, oh my gosh, I drink so much more water. Like, I love the Stanley mug. And now I'm like getting for the kids, I like love this thing. But I was thinking about how like people, when creators were sharing that, it's because it really solved a problem. Like it was something that like enhanced your life. And it was so basic that everybody needs it. And so as you think about creator, it's very hard to make it as like a ball ground creator, right? But it's much easier to make it as a creator that, you're solving real problems for a large group of people. And so I think that's another thing to think about, but doing that kind of very, consistently. And then I think pay attention to what the data and the stats are telling you or what your audience is telling you. I love it when I talk to creators or I'll give you a tip from one that I talked to recently. And she was like, it started clicking for me when I started publishing to the e-commerce calendar. This is going to sound crazy and this is going to sound way too commercial, but hear me out on this. There is a reason that I'm just making this up, but like that June 4th, people start talking about red, white, and blue things online because you need the time to research it, to order it, or to arrive at your house, for you to feel like you have confidence it's going to be there. And so when you talk about solving real problems for real people, if you are someone who's going to talk about, certain holidays, whether it's Mother's Day, Father's Day, 4th of July, name your holiday, like you actually do have to have a plan to plan into that. And then you're more helpful and you're a better hospitality service to those people that are following you, and they can depend on you more. And so this person was saying, right in front of my eyes, but the way that this started clicking for me is when I started kind of following that calendar. LTK provides these calendars. If you're not part of LTK, you can definitely kind of poke around online and sort of see when retailers start talking about like kind of certain holidays and things. But that gets you kind of, when do people start searching for bathing suits? When do they care? And it's not on August 5th. I can tell you that, they've already bought their bathing suits by then. It's not useful for them to be inspired by that. And so that'd be my third tip. So number one is be human, and that's your superpower. And don't forget, you're here to build a community. Number two is know that it's a business and that you have to invest as if it is such, and you're not going to make money day one, but that's how all businesses are. They take investment. And then the third thing is just, this is the like very tactical, but try publishing to an e-commerce calendar, because that's going to keep you on track with what people care about when.
Yeah, no, those are all amazing tips. Okay, one more question. Is there anything coming down the pipeline that you can share with LTK?
Oh gosh, there's so much coming down. Now I'm like, okay, what can I share? Let's see. So, well, in the last kind of like year and a half, we've more than doubled our team. I think there's close to 800 team members now. And so the reason that we did that was to bring our roadmaps forward so we could be, releasing a lot more, a lot faster. We know exactly what we want to do. And so there's something kind of for everyone. I would say on the consumer side, very soon you will be able to be in a much better relationship with the creators that you follow through their LTK shop. So I'll leave that very high level. On the creator side, new formats, new media types that are launching that will allow you to better connect and better community build and better share. Because like you said, it can be hard sometimes to like really connect. And so we want you to have different ways to do that. On the brand side, we launched just a year ago, the brand side where they can self-serve. So brands of all budgets, all sizes can come in and self-serve on LTK. There's 1,000 brands now using that platform, and there are tons of new tools there as far as like searching and sorting and finding the right creators for you. And so there's really something for everyone. These teams have grown so much. LTK Con is back. So beginning of October, you will see that. The creator awards are back as well. And gosh, what did I miss? If you are an LTK creator following the LTK creators handle, you're getting the most kind of like, it's an invitation only handle. Go check it out. And then we'll get you approved, and you're kind of staying up to date with all the tips and tricks kind of as they happen, because there's so much changing in this space right now.
Yeah, no, that I am part of the new LTK creators handle, and there's been so many good pieces of advice, or just even like things that I knew, but like new ways to put the content out. So that's definitely a very beneficial Instagram handle. I'm so glad you guys started that.
We just hired an SVP of creator growth. And so she has a rich history in publicly traded companies helping solopreneurs to grow their businesses. And we're building out a huge, team behind her currently. And hopefully some of our creators have already felt that. But I would say make sure that you're opted into like text messages, the push notifications, the emails, all of that stuff, because there's a whole coaching team behind that things are changing quickly. And so, in being able to react and take advantage of opportunities, whether they're within our platform or within other platforms, we're sharing that all with you. So make sure that you're getting the information.
Yeah, I will even say just over the last 7 years that I've been a creator on the platform, just seeing the investment that you guys have started within the last few years into the creators has just been amazing. Because you're kind of like learning and figuring it out when I first started. And then there was this just like turn, and you guys just started pouring into creators. And I think that's also what really made you guys stand out. And it's a great place for people to join and actually like learn how to really do this. So I've always really appreciated just the growth on the creator development side that you guys have implemented over the last few years.
Thank you. Yes, it's been a huge focus.
Well, Amber, thank you so much. Do you mind telling our listeners where they can find you? We'll put all the information in the show notes as well, but this conversation has just been so lovely.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Brittany. So I am on LTK. It's just my name, Amber Venz Box. I publish most there, and it's kind of like a journal. So if you want to know like what's happening in my life, it's all there. My highlight reel is Instagram. So that's Amber Venz Box as well. On the business side, there's a ton happening there. So on LinkedIn, if you're on LinkedIn, Amber Venz Box, and be sure that you've downloaded the free LTK app so that you can follow Brittany and myself and tons of other creators there. They're pouring their hearts out for you and doing lots of work to make your life easy. So I hope that you guys enjoy it.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And our Life with Loverly friends, we will talk to you guys soon.